Welcome to Engaging ESG, where we consider, challenge, and celebrate the evolving world of environmental, social, and governance communications, all in an increasingly complex landscape. I'm Jennifer Owens, marketing executive and consultant.
And I'm Kati Kallins, Global Head of Sustainability at Adobe. For Season 4, we're once again talking with climate leaders who are shaping the present and future of sustainability messaging. From connecting with stakeholders to crafting compelling impact stories, we're uncovering the strategies that worked and learning from those that didn't.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or new to the field, you'll find practical tips and insights in every episode.
And whether you're working on your first sustainability report or reimagining your organization's climate narrative, these conversations will help you navigate the complexities of ESG communications. Let's get started.
Hello, Kati. How you doing?
Hi, Jen. Oh, just excited to be back here with you today on the mic. How are you?
Well, I'm dialing in from the frozen tundra that is New York City, also known as the balmiest part of New York State. Because
I saw people snowboarding and skiing in Central Park online. So at least people are making the best of it, I guess.
I hope so, because I'm tired of the cold. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm originally from New England. You'd think it's in my blood. I'm Swedish by extraction, and nope, done. I'm done with it. I'm completely
Well, I think
done.
our guest is also calling in from the frozen tundra. So should we jump into the intro and then
I love
warm
it.
us up?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So this week, we're excited to welcome Michelle Lee, a global climate champion and founder who's on a mission to make carbon literacy accessible, engaging, and even fun, which is something we know nothing about here at Engaging ESG. So Michelle's career began in Silicon Valley with stints at Salesforce and DocuSign. In 2020, she started her first sustainability initiative, Clever Carbon, bringing her Silicon Valley expertise in branding and communication to the climate space. Clever Carbon works to demystify carbon emissions and empower people to make informed decisions. And she's created tools like a 2-minute carbon footprint quiz, which I've taken, and it's shocking, pocket guides, and even a carbon footprint coffee menu. And we're going to talk about why this format, because it's so engaging. So in 2022, she founded Women in Climate, a nonprofit initiative that creates a joyful and safe space for women to start their climate journey. The organization has grown to include more than 1,200 climate pros in its speaker database. We're some of them. More than 7,000 global women in its Slack group, and hosts events in cities around the world. And then in 2023, she launched the Carbon Newbie Summit at New York Climate Week, an event specifically designed for professionals interested in climate action, but whose day jobs aren't climate related. And really, I mean, we could go on, but I think that'll get us started. So we're so glad to have you here, Michelle. Welcome to Engaging ESG.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Kati. I am very excited for the conversation today.
Well, so I've had, as you can hear, the joy of interacting with much of what Michelle has created. So, but not really Clever Carbon. I've seen pieces of it through the Carbon Newbie Summit. So that's where I'd like to start. Tell us what you've built with Clever Carbon and the gap it's trying to fill. And also, as I was saying, about the branding, the love, the joy, the fun, why that way?
So when I started Clever Carbon about 4 years ago, not very many people, organizations, and governments were talking about carbon footprint. And in my early research, when I was trying to learn what carbon footprint actually was, because, I was working in tech, I didn't really need to know. I just found that a lot of the content was very boring. It clearly wasn't meant for the layman. And it was like ISO this and the standards that, and so many acronyms. The first time I saw a carbon label is when everything clicked for me. Think of a nutrition label, but for carbon footprint. And I also was looking at different carbon footprint quizzes for individuals, and it all just kind of came together for me. And I was like, this is what I need to teach people about, because people, we understand numbers. Our brain loves numbers. No one knows what a calorie is. No one knows what the Richter scale is. But when I say 6.3, you know what that means versus 2.1. And without me saying, that I was referring to the Richter scale as opposed to calories.
Right.
Versus what is a calorie? It's a unit of energy, I think. That's kind of what I learned in school.
Oh, and it's not, and if you've ever studied it, it's not actually real in some, like, yes, we're
Yeah,
just agreeing to those numbers as a number base.
exactly. Right. And that totally works because our brain understands numbers. And when we have things to compare against each other, it helps us make more informed decisions. And I started Clever Carbon because I felt like that was really the missing gap, right? Before, flying was bad, coffee cups are bad. That's the language that we had: good, bad, right, wrong, versus, oh, single use coffee cups, around 16 grams of CO2 emissions. If we include the cup, the lid, the sleeve, flying for an hour, about 120 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Like now we're using numbers. We can be objective instead of being, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, or this is bad, because that is so subjective, right? What's right for you may be wrong for me. And the same thing goes even with nutrition, right? Like people are able to make their own decisions, they're empowered to. And when they have information, they make even better decisions for themselves. So that's really the premise. And I think what's really unique is having just really rich experience in enterprise sales at Salesforce and DocuSign and being a part of so many go-to market initiatives. I just understood the power of marketing and branding from day one. And that's what Clever Carbon is. It's a familiar brand. It's safe. It's fun. It's cheeky. It doesn't make sustainability doom and gloom. It is not emphasizing extreme weather, all the different negative connotations and outcomes of climate change. Those are real, and I'm not ignoring them. But if we want to make and create real change that scales, we need more bodies, more eyes, more action, more influence. And the only way that we are going to get that, especially in this phase where things are getting worse, but they haven't hit rock bottom yet. And so people they still can have time to react. The way that we can get more eyes, more bodies on this is to market it in a way that feels safe, familiar, and gets people curious and is solutions oriented, which is how I think about Clever Carbon and the work that we do.
Yeah, no, that's a great overview. And I know you said you started the organization 4 years ago, but you've already actually gone through a bit of transformation in that time. So wanted to ask next about kind of the focus. So as you noted, more eyes, more kind of understanding generally, and the focus was on individual consumers, but more recently you've pivoted now to working with corporations to spread carbon literacy. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about that pivot, what you learned. And I definitely have some opinions about the honest of individual responsibility in the climate conversation. I was
Mhm.
just arguing with my partner about plastics recycling, but where do you see the power of carbon literacy being the most effective? Because I know this is something that we are approached with a lot at industry events or just from family and friends.
Yeah, thank you for that, Katie. And I think that there could be a whole other podcast on climate conversations I have with my non-climate partner. And I think it would be really interesting. But I see my work with corporations as progression and evolution as opposed to a pivot. When I first started Clever Carbon, I was still working at a tech company at the time. It was a side project. The company that I worked for really empowered me to pursue my interests, whether it was at the workplace. I spearheaded Veganuary at the workplace, and today it's still in place. And even my personal pursuits around Clever Carbon, it was very much supported, which I'm very grateful for. But when I think about the work that we're doing at Clever Carbon and how to scale that and also put a roof over my head, they're two different things, but they actually come together as one, right? I think sometimes we take for granted the importance of employers. If we think about post college, where do we learn about new information, mental health, DEI, just health in general, like fitness, COVID protocols, and now AI? We learn them from our employers. They're the most effective way of disseminating information. They have resources to make sure that that information is interesting and rich. And when it comes to things like even employee wellness, I think sustainability and climate are absolutely one of the pillars and the new pillars, right? Because it's a topic that has come up only recently within the last 5 years, like really come into mass media. So I think employers play this really pivotal role and they don't even know it for the most part. And when it comes to helping people learn about climate, I think employers can really facilitate, amplify, and it's this win-win-win, right? It's a win for the company, especially if you have ESG goals. And even if you don't, a lot of the times when you're incorporating sustainability, you're cutting out emissions, you're cutting out costs, right? There's a business imperative for it, but it's good for the employee, right? I think, just teaching them about small things that they can do to make a difference. And then it's good for the planet. Like, who doesn't want a triple win? So, first of all, I'll mention that. But then also for the work that I was doing, right? I was working in tech, I had this side project, and then I was just taking a break and then looking for a new role. And I just wasn't applying for jobs because I spent all my time creating content for Clever Carbon. That's what I loved.
I love it.
And
That's when your side hustle starts to creep.
yeah, I was like, well, how can this contribute to putting a roof over my head? And that's how the idea for an employee engagement workshop came up. I'll like lift the lid a little bit to uncover kind of how this process had went. But like I had worked for a tech company and it was during COVID at the time. And we had our kind of annual company retreat, but was virtual, obviously, because it was COVID. And we had this fantastic speaker come in to speak about the winter mindset. It was about mental health, which is obviously very relevant to that time. And I learned later that, we had 150 employees and this speaker was paid multiple thousands of dollars. And I was like, wow. It was like, if one day I can do that. And like, I've been on the receiving end of countless workshops and trainings. My job, working in tech as a sales engineer was to, in part, produce really engaging presentations for customers. And, I was involved in webinars and all that stuff too. So like I already had these skill sets and was a customer myself. And that's really how the idea came about. Like, what if I created this workshop? HR teams have budget, they have cadence, they have framework and structure, right? Monthly lunch and learns or lunch and learns during special moments like Earth Day. Everything was in place. Just what was missing was my employee engagement workshop for me, right? I'm sure there are others out there. So that's kind of how it started. And I kind of look back to my original workshop and I tested it out on my old colleagues and have refined it a lot since. And it has really evolved. But I'm telling a story, I'm breaking down something that seems really complex. And I think about the days in tech, right? Like, what is single sign on? What is an electronic signature, right? Like, those are things that I would have to explain to customers. What is carbon footprint? Now I get to do it for something that I feel really passionate about. But now I also get to put a roof over my head, knock on wood, 2026, let's be a good year. But yeah, it's a progression as opposed to pivot. And again, I think employers play such an important role. So, for those of you that are listening who are part of an ERG or you are part of the ESG or sustainability team or HR team, like you have an important role to play. And there are many different resources and practitioners out there that can contribute to your wellness programs and employee learning.
Well, and so to go deeper, so when you are presenting, when you're leading us, you've got this wonderful audience because they all have to be there to attend, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
So what about the tension between the personal and the corporate around carbon? So how are you navigating this and in the message that you're sending and the work what they're hearing?
And I want to expand this
to
like even a bigger picture than like the individual versus the company, because I get this comment all the time as someone who is an advocate for carbon literacy, right? I get this, well, individuals don't make a difference, right? We need governments, we need corporations, it's a small percent of companies in organizations that are creating outsized amount of emissions. And that's not untrue. But I would argue the individual is so important, especially at this juncture of climate change. And it's new year, 2025, the average concentration was 427.5 parts per million. So I'm feeling bold and I have a hot take that I want to share with you, Katie and Jennifer. And that is like, I'm using a bit of an isolated example, but cigarettes today are still legal. Okay. If we are going to rely on this top down approach and rely on our governments to help us solve climate change, what is it going to look like? You're going to see a label on a gas station being like,
Gas kills. Yeah.
beware, warning on your gas pump. There's going to be more taxes on your fuel. And if we're lucky, we'll have more low congestion, low pollution zones, right? Like, yet at the height of cigarette sales in the US in 1981, there was 640 billion cigarettes that were sold, right? In 2021, there were around 190 billion. And that's not because the government limited sales. It's not because the government did anything different, but because individual preferences changed. And that is really the theory of change that I'm working on, and why influencing the individual is so important. And maybe like coming back to corporations, right? Let's think about soft drink sales. Before people knew the amount of sugar that was in soft drinks, I know people that drank 3 to 4 a day. I probably was one of them. But when individuals had more information and they learned that there was 40 grams in a soft drink, cool. But then they learned that iced tea has 15 to 20 grams. Then they learned that there are alternative options. Corporations pivoted. They created more diet, zero drinks, vitamin waters, kombuchas, right? We have like whole new beverage trends now because people care about their health and they want beverages and food that is going to be net positive for them. So this is not about letting companies off the hook. This is not putting blame on anyone, but if we can influence enough individuals to change their preferences, then corporations will pivot, right? I guess that's part of where capitalism can really help is they care about consumers. And if we can make their preferences change by helping them make informed decisions, then corporations will follow and regulations will come in place afterwards, as it has many times in the past.
Yeah, I think those are really great comparisons. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the impacts of the climate crisis are health impacts. So the connection is more direct than we would even maybe like to see. So, as we're kind of getting towards the end of our interview, I want to make sure we touch upon another kind of institution community that you started, which is the Women in Climate group. I think if we look at the work that you've done in this space, it's a lot around education. It's a lot about community building, which loneliness epidemic, right? Like, I think having community in this work is so incredibly important. And that's how I learned about you and your work initially. So let's talk for a moment about the space of Women in Climate that you created in 2022, which you describe as a joyful and safe space for women to learn about climate. And Jen and I have both attended events. They definitely are incredibly inclusive and warm. And I know a lot of folks trying to get into the climate space often feel like they need to have a PhD in geology to even be allowed to walk into the room. So would love to hear more about what prompted you to create a space for women in climate, and also how you utilize volunteers to kind of keep the energy going. People don't have a lot of extra time or energy on their plate, but clearly people are coming back and supporting these events. So you've created something sustainable.
Thank you for that. And it's amazing to hear that both you and Jen have been to events. I think there's something really special about Women in Climate. And I want to give a shout out as well to my co-founder, Stephanie Corpely, who together we kind of built this up from scratch. But part of why I wanted to create Women in Climate, it was kind of serendipitous. I was new to New York. I was new to climate. I wanted to meet new friends and I wanted to learn more about the space. I was attending a lot of climate networking events and I was hosting them myself. And there were a lot of men that came, which is absolutely fine, right? This space needs all types of people, minds involved. But I found that the dialogue that I was exposed to was more around investors and startups as opposed to, well, I want to know how you really feel about the energy transition and how you really feel about EVs. Like, are they going to solve all of our problems if we all switch to EVs? Like, all of a sudden, like, the whole inefficiency of vehicles doesn't matter, but like, as long as we have EVs, like, it's good. Like, I wanted to have deeper conversations and I wanted to sit down to dinner and also, like, what are you watching on Netflix? Like, what do people who care about climate also consume media wise? And so I started the first dinner at New York at a vegan restaurant and I put it on Eventbrite. It's for 12 people and just shared it on LinkedIn. And 12 people came. Most of them I didn't even know. And one person, there was no space for her because the reservation was 12 and that was the max. And then she came anyways because she was like, well, I was hoping someone would no show. And of course, one person no
The one
showed.
time.
So she came and joined us. And that's kind of how it all started. We had such a great time. We were so loud in the best way possible. And I did it again next month, which is when Stephanie joined. And after she joined, then she offered to volunteer to help me co-host the next event. And then we did another dinner. And then at the time, First Republic Bank was interested and gave us space to host an event. And then we did an event for like 40 people where we had some speakers. And that's the early impetus. And then we were like, oh, let's create a Slack group. And like we had 10 people in the Slack group. And then we were like, oh, let's create a LinkedIn. Like we're not even a real organization. And then today, we have over 35,000 followers on LinkedIn.
My
We have
goodness.
7,000 international global Slack group. And Clever Carbon, we didn't even get to talk to this, but we work with some of the biggest brands from the NBA, the Basketball Association, to Mubadala, a sovereign fund of Abu Dhabi, which is a huge global influencer. And we have 4,000 followers on LinkedIn, and we've been around for longer. And for a shorter time, Women in Climate has 35,000. Like, that's just magnitudes of scale that hits differently. And what's important for Women in Climate for me is that women care, women take action, and they're going to be the ones that will go to workplace services and say, hey, can we have less plastic in the kitchen? Hey, what can we do about our 401k, right? Like, women are going to be the one who raise these questions. And if we can educate them, give them the skills that they need so that they know what actions have the most scale in the time frame that we have to work with, like, we're all better off. And personally, when I first attended these networking events, as Katie mentioned, right, like it can be very intimidating. So lots of acronyms, everyone knows each other, right? And there's so many topics on climate that you can be an expert, from circularity to supply chain to AI and data centers and everything in between, adaptation, nature, biodiversity, right? So as someone new, like, it's absolutely daunting. So that's why at Women in Climate, we are very welcoming of women at any level of climate literacy. And we always make a point to mention that during our events, whether it's in person or virtual. And I think the joy is important because in order for us to really want to take action, like there has to be some kind of warmth, joy, happiness to it. Otherwise, like, why would we put ourselves through something that is really just like crisis oriented? So that's really the premise around Women in Climate. And Kate, you asked a question around volunteers, and it's an interesting question because Women in Climate is built on volunteers. I've been executive director for the entire duration. I have not received a salary, so I'm also a volunteer. I love the work that I do and I love seeing the impact that we do, but it is really difficult to sustain. And last year at Women in Climate, we had a restorative year because I just needed to prioritize work that was going to put a roof over my head because I don't have a tech salary anymore. And I need to put in the foundations for me to have an income so that I have extra space.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And then we have lots of different volunteers over time with Women in Climate. But what I would like to say about that is for those that have been really dedicated and for those that have stayed on long term with us, like what I want to do is find ways to compensate them monetarily.
Yes.
And that's something that I actively think about. And the board is actively thinking about for me as well, right?
Right.
Like we are becoming a mature organization. So what are the programs that we can have in place to ensure we have an income, one that's sustainable, one that allows us to still make this really open so that anyone can join. You don't have to pay fees.
Right.
But so all this to say, I think volunteers play such an important role, especially at the beginning. And then for the organization to be sustainable, like you can't rely on volunteers forever. You need to fairly compensate the people that are contributing. And that's kind of the stage that we're at right now.
I love it. And let's touch on quickly, because we always love to hear how you're sustaining yourself, is the Carbon Newbie Summit is very much everything you're talking about brought together, also welcoming, also joyful, also about learning about the numbers and the like. So will that continue with New York? If you haven't attended, it's always held during New York Climate Week.
Yeah, absolutely. We will not be doing SF Climate Week, which we have done 2 years, for 2 years in a row. The first one was hosted at the Allbirds office, which was so cool. And then last year we were at the Silicon Valley Bank offices, which was
that was fancy,
really
people.
Cool.
It was very fancy.
It was so fun. We had like Hunter Pence, who is a former Major League Baseball player who is really passionate about climate change, and he came to speak. And we had the Warriors, basketball.
You can still be welcoming, but have really nice digs. I don't mind that combo.
Exactly. But this year, we definitely are doing it. It's going to be Wednesday, September 23rd.
Let me write that
down. Don't worry, I'll send you a calendar invite.
Please do.
Yes, write it down as well. But yeah, we'll be hosting it at Devitt Was in Plimpton again, which is where we hosted it last year. And I kind of see an evolution with Carbon Newbie Summit as well, based on the interest that we've gotten from the community. It's called the Carbon Newbie Summit, but we have people from sovereign funds, ESG practitioners who have been in the space for years come and attend and have fun. So I'm very excited for the lineup this year. We're currently brainstorming. I like to be the early bird that gets the worm. Like I don't like leaving anything to the last minute. So we're already planning our program at Carbon Newbie Summit. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Well, so as we come to the end of our time together, something that we always love to talk about is like, what are you listening to? What are the fun things, either in the climate space or I'm still into my 70s detective shows. I can't tell you. I don't know. I've gone so deep into them to the point where we can see the same sets used across different shows. That's how deep it's just nobody should be this deep. But how about yourself? What's on your nightstand or your TV these days?
So when it comes to reading, I am finishing up a book that has multiple kind of special meanings. It's Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. It's a very widely known book. Rachel is a widely known environmental advocate, and her work has been very impactful across the years, and she's worked with various presidents, and she's one of the OGs when it comes to environmental advocacy. And the first time I learned about the book is when I watched Three Body Problem, which I then read the book Three Body Problem, which was then like, oh my God, if you've not read Three Body Problem,
I haven't.
Wow. Like there are YouTube explainers for the book. It is so out of this world in the most imaginative way possible. I really, really highly recommend it. And so the book Silent Spring is also early on mentioned in the book of Three Body Problems. So I really wanted to read it. And at Women in Climate, we have a book club led by Maria Tooker. And this book was chosen for the book club. Unfortunately, I didn't get to read it in time for all of the different meetings, but I'm finished up right now. And hopefully I'll be done with that soon. But obviously, it's a very impactful book. It's one of the classics, and I encourage folks to read it. And then on the TV side, so I'm like a shows junkie. Like it's really helpful for me from a pop culture standpoint. I get inspiration for the work that we do at Clever Carbon. And right now, I don't know if are any of you Game of Thrones fans?
I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
but I haven't
Katie,
watched
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but
Yeah. Yeah. You've seen it. I mean, it's a commitment. It's like what,
yeah,
8 seasons, 9
it was
seasons.
a pandemic commitment. Yeah. Easy enough.
Yeah. So it's like one of my favorite shows, and a spin-off, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, was just released like a couple of weeks ago. So I've been watching that. But in Canada, you can get HBO content through this platform called Crave. And Crave has all the HBO content. So now I'm rewatching some of House of the Dragon, which is an interesting story on women empowerment and women leadership. Like, if you haven't watched it, it's quite incredible. Like, people argue about the pace and how it compares to Game of Thrones. I actually, like, in some ways, like House of the Dragon more. And yeah, it happens to touch on all these like women's themes. So that's what I'm watching right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. And obviously, I'm so out of the Game of Thrones world that I didn't even know there was a spinoff. Like, everyone knew.
Yeah, there's many spinoffs.
Now, I am here to tell you, as I raise the stakes, that George R.R. Martin owns a short tourism railroad in Santa Fe, which we have ridden on. So there is that. So.
Wow. Okay. I haven't been to Santa Fe, so that's a good thing to add to my list.
I have a child who lives there. So
that's right. Yeah.
And so when I saw the train, I went, oh, that's the train. So yes, you can take the Skyway Railway. So there you go.
Amazing.
Anyhow, well, Michelle.
I took that train last summer, actually, Jen. We'll have to talk about it. It was really fun. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But anyway, we could keep talking about trains and dragons forever. But thank you, Michelle, so much for coming on to season 4 of Engaging ESG. And we look forward to seeing you at an event soon.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Katie and Jennifer.
Thank you for joining us on Engaging ESG. Have a question for us to consider or a strategy you'd like us to cover? Email us today at engagingesg@gmail.com.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Engaging ESG today. It helps us grow, and even better, be sure to share the podcast with your favorite sustainability, diversity, or social impact colleague. And until next time, keep engaging.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.